Hey everybody, John Malanca here, United Patients Group, and just finished a great podcast with Dr. Gary Simmons. Great guy, really enjoyed this. And Dr. Gary is someone who lives up in the Washington State area, who had used cannabis in his life, but about 5 years ago he was diagnosed, and it was a total fluke on how they found this. But he went in for a hernia surgery, and then said, "Hey doc, can you check this little bump on my back?" And it turned out it was stage 4 metastatic melanoma, which turned out to have 30 internal tumors, not only in his back, but in his lung, et cetera. And so he did his research, panic education, as Corinne and I would always talk about it. And he went to his local dispensary. Thank goodness he lived in a legal state. But he says, "Is there anything in here that can help fight cancer?" And she the bud tender kind of said, "Yeah, take your pick." But he directed her to a cannabis oil, fecal oil. Rick Simpson is what she called it. Anyway, he did the protocol, and the outcome, he's cancer free. And what he shared, he is a retired minister and reverend, so he has a congregation of 200 plus people. But he's a patient that reached out, wanted to share his story, and turned out it was a great podcast. So I hope you enjoy it, because I certainly did. So thank you, Gary, for reaching out as well, and enjoy it. See you soon. Bye. Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is John Malanca with United Patients Group. Be informed and be well. And today's guest is Dr. Gary Simmons up there in Washington State. Welcome, Gary.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me, John.
Let's share how well. So I was always told, if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. And probably about a month ago, 3 weeks to a month ago, I received an email from Gary. Said, "I've been following you, and this is what I've gone through, and I'll let you share your story. And I would love to, are you open to having another speaker or a guest on your show?" And I wrote you right back. I said, I would love it. So I thank you for taking that step forward. And when we got on before the recording here, I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." Well, I feel like I've known you because we watched you, but good to have you on.
Well, thanks. Thanks, John. So let me just first share why I contacted you. And as an ordained Unity minister, I have a congregation of 200 folks in Spokane, Washington. Actually, we're now, my wife and I, co-ministers, are now retired. We've moved to Kettle Falls, which is about 2 hours north of Spokane. Mm-hmm. But suffice to say that I have people in our congregation who've had the COVID-19, and they've struggled with symptoms, complications after they have tested negative, and still dealing with what is now labeled the long hauler syndrome, and wondering if there's been the conversations that you've had with other medical professionals who consult patients wanting to use cannabis, if there's been any support or any inroads made for helping in that regard. And so the context for my asking the question, of course, is that I'm a member and follower of United Patients Group. And the reason why I am is because I found you having gone through my own cancer healing process and journey. 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic melanoma, a rare form of internal skin cancer, presenting over 30 tumors, a couple of them the size as golf balls and lemons. And I went to, I had recently had at that time a hernia operation. I went back to the surgeon and asked him, "What's this lump on my back here?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. I'll just come back in next week. I'll check it. I'll take it out." And so we went back, and he started working on it. And boy, this is more complicated than I'm thinking it's supposed to be. And about 35, 40 minutes later, he pulls out this thing. And he says, "This doesn't look good." Anyway, suffice to say, 30 tumors being revealed in the PET scan. And I immediately—
all the lower back area too?
Well, all over throughout my body. I had them in my lung, my bowel, back of my neck. Fortunately, nothing in my brain. But I immediately went to, because I had in the past had some familiarity with recreational cannabis. I had also been having gone through the passing of my previous wife, who had a glioblastoma multiforme, brain cancer, and suffered with her through that experience, through all of her chemo and radiation and all the things that they threw at her, and watched her quality of life so impacted by it. I vowed that if I ever got sick myself, I wasn't going to go the route of chemotherapy or radiation. So all those options were really off the table when I was diagnosed. So I went to a dispensary in Spokane. That was back when this recreation and dispensaries were two different things. And actually, I discovered that I couldn't go to the dispensary. I had to get a certification. So I went to the recreational store, and I asked a young lady in the in the pot store, "Do you have anything for cancer?" And she looks around and she says, "Yeah."
Take your pick, huh?
Take your pick. But she couldn't tell me anything. But she was able to write on a little Post-it note 3 letters, RSO. And so she said, "Google that." Well, the long story short is that I found a path to my own healing. Of course, it's not the path that's I haven't had anybody ever follow after me in my path, because it was the protocol that was very intense. Having to ingest up to 1 gram of RSO, full extract cannabis oil daily was quite a challenge, along with being a minister, co-minister in a congregation of 200, and having to treat myself during that process. Well, suffice to say that after 60 days or 90 days between the PET scans, I was cancer-free, much to the amazement of my oncologist. And in sharing my story with my congregation, I found myself inundated with individuals wanting support. And I don't know about you, but if you ever walk into one of these dispensaries or these pot stores, it's like walking into a casino. You're bombarded by all of these images of products and things. I mean, and to be able to make sense of all those complexities, I found myself having to educate myself with regard to the products that are available, because so many people in my church had all these ailments that their medical doctors were unwilling to address, and even telling the individuals in my church that if you try medical cannabis, you're not going to be a patient of mine anymore.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm sure you've heard that before from other individuals, and to be in a position where it's one thing to be a person's minister, and it's another thing to know how to be able to support them. And for me, I found myself going to the pot stores with members of my church and helping them read the labels and really be able to ask questions about what they're purchasing in relationship to what they're trying to achieve in their own personal life, and not having any kind of real education myself in the beginning. It was mostly just tagging along and helping the person kind of feel supported in the process.
But which is big, and I've done that, because even when Corinne was 100% healthy years ago, she needed a recommendation because she was the caregiver for her father, and she'd always say, "Go in there, go in there." And I said, "Come on, babe, I'll take you in there." And she was nervous because cannabis wasn't her lifestyle. And so it got to the point where now that she felt comfortable in there and people would call, she'd tell you what, I'll meet you down there. And she'd handhold. And sometimes it just takes that extra handhold to give the confidence of something new. And imagine going through something as serious as cancer, like you were, like, help. Is there anything here that fights cancer? And for her to turn around and say, well, take your pick. I mean, there are so many products out there. There's so many formulations and dosing and stories and protocols. I mean, I'm so happy that you found that. And with you finding the RSO, I'm on the fence with RSO because of not every patient, in my opinion, should take 1 gram. You had success. Did you know Rick Simpson actually successfully fought his own skin cancer?
Yes, I knew that.
It wasn't pancreatic, wasn't brain, wasn't lung, but skin. And now the media has really changed it. I don't want people to think that every cannabis oil is Rick Simpson oil. It's like calling all Starbucks coffee. And I learned the hard. Actually, I didn't learn the hard way, but I did an article on Rick Simpson back in 2011, and we put on the site, and a lot of the oil makers in the industry really jumped on me and said, "Do you know how the true Rick Simpson oil is made? Do you know what the true Rick Simpson protocol is?" They would say, I don't think, I think you should do your research on it. And that's when I did. But I'm so happy for you, because I would never tell anybody not to try something and take away that hope. I mean, if someone said, eat this computer mouse, it could help. I'd say, Gary, scoot on over. We're going to cut this baby in half and start chewing on it. So your journey, I mean, where you were, where you are now, what you're doing. I didn't know about your wife, in your bio. You don't have that on your websites at all.
No, it was in this. It was in what I sent you. And last night I sent you.
I didn't see that, and I looked for that this morning. So I was scouring your website. So my apologies.
No, that's yes. My previous wife. Well, this is 18 years ago, but
yeah,
18 years ago there wasn't. If there was an approach to her cancer with the medical route, she would have also been inclined to do it also. Yeah. But anyway, so after having gone through the protocol and then being educated through watching, your interviews as well as.
Before I'm sorry to cut you off there, but can you share with some of our listeners that may be completely new to this, what that protocol is and and why we were talking about that?
Okay, so Rick Simpson oil, or as you mentioned, is a generalized term to denotes full extract cannabis oil that is typically produced by dissolving the material into some kind of solvent or otherwise medium that is then boiled off, and you're left with the oily resin that is mostly a high percentage of THC. And so the protocol is to begin with a very small dose, a half a grain of rice, which is probably about 10 milligrams of THC, or 20, or maybe it's even 50, I don't know, but to start very slow, and then to double it as you are able to acclimate to it, to where you're eventually able to, spreading out over 24 hours, to be able to ingest a gram of oil a day. And so I was able to acclimate myself. It took me about 3 or 4 weeks to be able to get up to a gram a day. And then after I was acclimated, I wasn't psychoactive very often.
Wow.
Occasionally it would happen. So I went for 3 months once I was fully acclimated, at least a gram or even more a day. There was a time I thought that more was better, as you've mentioned. That's sort of the where we go when we're afraid that we're doing whatever we need to do to stay alive. And so I was able to ingest a gram and a half without any problems, and so I did.
And for our listeners, that is like Gary and I having a beer tonight and 2 jugs of whiskey tomorrow. I mean, that's
right. That's
heavy duty stuff.
Right. And so this would not be something that anybody else would want to attempt.
Yeah.
And to be totally honest, as when I affected my healing, people asked me, what did I do? And I told them, and they tried to do what I did, and they couldn't. And so it's not a way to proceed. So anybody listening to that needs to not proceed in that regard, because that's not a path that is appropriate for everybody. It worked for me, but I made it work for me. There's that.
And that was 5+ years ago, correct?
Yes.
So at that time, 5+ years ago, everyone was turning to that. And just again, for our listeners, Rick Simpson is a gentleman, a Canadian, who treat and beat his skin cancer, by making this concoction of the full extract cannabis oil, high THC, taking a gram or more a day, which is a lot. you mentioned, Gary, about the rice grains, and I forgot about that. Just funny how this industry has changed from then to now and where it will probably go. But for the longest time, the unit of measurement with oil were rice grains, you know? And it's like, okay, is it brown rice? Is it mahogany rice? Is it white rice? Is it, and is it long Indian rice? And so we'll go with the white Asian rice. How about that? But there's about 17 plus or minus rice grains that equal about a gram. And just show you what Gary consumed. My father-in-law, who fought his cancer, stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to his brain, never exceeded a half a grain of rice. So Gary's on 17 grains of rice, just to show you. If my father-in-law exceeded a 1 grain of rice, he was toasted. So I would personally, I wouldn't recommend that, but everyone's on their journey. And sometimes, the power of the mind can just, hey, I'm going to do this. And so I do know people that have had success taking high doses. So just want to give a little background on Rick himself. And then unfortunately, the Canadian government kind of banned him, and he's like this mythical legend, like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, that have had to run from the law. And so where is he right now? I don't know. It's we don't know. He does show up on webinars and Zooms here. But anyway, your story.
Well, so just to kind of complete this part, I'm no longer ingesting that amount. So I have a kind of more of a broader approach to my maintenance and health. And so I focus on the 4 cannabinoids that Dr. Frankel talked about, 30 milligrams of CBDA, THCA, and CBD, and then THC. Of course, I dose nightly. It's not 30 milligrams, but it's a little bit more than that. But that's my routine. And I've also created videos on how to make THC and CBDA capsules out of CBD and THC isolates. And so it's convenient, it's easy, it's not too expensive. I was grinding up bud and putting them in capsules, and that became too labor intensive.
Yeah.
But what I do now is when people come to me, they're earnest about wanting to try something, and so as you have mentioned, the rule of thumb is start out low and slow, and then you attempt to dial in the precise medicine that you need, and so that's what I try to share with people, that there's a methodology to being able to benefit from medical cannabis. It's just not like just try this and see if it works. It's about understanding how your endocannabinoid system functions, and to recognize that you have to treat the whole body, the whole system. It's not just treating a symptom; it's about treating the whole body. I've been so benefited by the people that you've interviewed over the years. Just for instance, just deal with sleep and see how that affects the rest of your ailments. The whole arena of understanding health and wellness and the holistic dimension of life has been expanded due to being drawn into medical cannabis and its application for and benefit for helping improving our quality of our life. And it's incumbent upon those of us who are called to kind of educate ourselves and also be able to talk about it openly and without any kind of concern about the stigma. When I go to a doctor's office, when they ask me what I'm taking in terms of medicines, I run down the list. and I make them write down in the medical record what I'm taking, so that they're used to understanding that there are patients that are using medical cannabis and are being benefited by it, independent of all the other reasons why they can't necessarily endorse it themselves. So
it's funny. because we were talking offline before we started doing doing the podcast, but we were talking about, you mentioned that some doctors will say to the patient, "Hey, if you're going to use cannabis, I need you to go get another doctor," and I hear that quite a bit. I even hear that here in California. I mean, we speak at retirement communities, and I'd always ask, is anybody have this conversation with their family members or doctors? Yes. What do your doctors say? My doctor says, if you're going to do this, I need you to find another doctor. And this lady stood up and I go, "What'd you do?" She goes, "I fired my doctor." And we all got a good chuckle out of it, but it's kind of the truth. And the same thing happened with my Aunt Lois. She's been with a doctor for 30 something years, and she's here in California. And he said, "Lois, I'm going to act like you didn't ask me that question." She says, "Come on, really?" And so, and that's an illegal state. I mean, I'm in a legal state, you're in a legal state, and we work with so many patients. And I was going to ask you that earlier. If you didn't live in Washington or a legal state, would you have turned to cannabis?
I've been dead by now, probably. Because I was in Missouri, living in near Kansas City, and there's nothing there. But I mean, that you could buy pot, to smoke illegally, but that's not the same as treating yourself with medical cannabis. I wouldn't have known necessarily to move to one of these legal states. I consider our move serendipitous. We had purchased property in Washington State 10 years ago, and the opening for the ministry came available. And so we saw moving to Washington State and taking on this ministry as an opportunity to close the distance between our retirement plans and where we were in our lives at that time. And so, interestingly enough, here's the interesting thing. The reason why this ministry was open is because the established minister had brain cancer, melanoma in his brain. And he was diagnosed with the same kind of cancer, but he fell upon a brand new trial using a new technique that we all now know as immunotherapy, Keytruda. Mm-hmm. And he's been on Keytruda every 3 weeks, an infusion for the last 5 years.
How's he doing?
He's doing okay. He just got COVID, and he's got problems associated with that. He's tested negative now, but he's still on oxygen and other things, respiratory issues. But imagine a congregation having their beloved minister have to leave because he got cancer, only to hire another couple who a year later is befallen by the same illness. And it kind of, it does a number on the community, obviously, and everybody kind of has to kind of wake up and watch what's going on. But the outcome was, I think, is that I became very open about my process, my healing, my struggle. Jane, who is a co-minister also, public speakers, was also able to share her struggles, her fears, and her concerns. In addition to I had after complications associated with my cancer treatment because I had tumors in my intestines. I had intestinal blockages that had to be addressed in the course of my treatment. This was after my remission. Mm-hmm. So I'm not without my own kind of challenges. And the other side of it, the positive side of it is that when people can see their minister have positive, transformative results, they pay attention to not only what the minister is doing, but why. And so I was, it's not my nature to try to say, okay, well, pot healed me. No, pot was something that was revealed to me as a part of my divine guidance. I was drawn into the experience of having this healing modality available to me. It was almost as if it's just a part of the plan. I mean, that's the story I'm making up about it, of course. Beautiful. But that's the story that helped inspire members in my community to attempt to address their issues in some fashion with medical cannabis. Now, I will say that shortly after my healing, I had one of our board members have kidney cancer, something related to his bladder or whatever, and was interested in my story. So after telling my story, he purchased all kinds of RSO vials and started his journey. Well, he got up to about 2 grains of rice, and he started going into having psychotic episodes that were very troubling. And he couldn't kind of deal with what emerges. And I mean, if you become catatonic and approach that level of intensity, the dark side starts to peek in through your awareness. You don't have pleasant thoughts about things, and so he was not able to quiet that part down. Now I'm a long-term meditator, so I'm able to manage what's happening internally and recognize, no, this is just the phenomenon of the medicine. It's not my reality changing on me. So people, no one has been able to follow my path, and that's just fine with me, because now I recognize that there's a much softer, more precise, gentler approach to managing life illnesses.
Softer, more general approach. Yeah, there is. Yeah, I laugh because it brings me back to when Corinne's father was diagnosed, 2011. My family was down in Santa Barbara, and Corinne and I went down there, and we weren't going to be able to make it back up, go to the dispensary in the Bay Area to get to her folks' house. So we went to a dispensary in Santa Barbara, and at that time, cannabis was cannabis, oil capsule was a capsule. Anyway, we went to dinner with friends. It was a Wednesday night, went to a Mexican restaurant, had 10 baskets of chips before our food came, and I'm not a drinker, so I wasn't drinking. And so ate all the basket chips, ate the food. And then I walked up to, what do we do? Anyway, we walked on the street, and I had this capsule, and I said to my buddy, Steve, I said, so we took a half, and I said, okay. And I just thought it was going to be 5 milligrams. Well, the capsule was a gram of oil.
Oh God.
And I took a half, and I went, and I know every crack in the street in Santa Barbara. I know every store. I know everybody there. They wanted me to run for mayor one time. Actually, a buddy of mine, the guy I was with, actually, he's born and raised Santa Barbara. He goes, man, you know everybody from the homeless guys to the celebrities and everybody in between. You need to run for mayor. And so I'm like, I'm not going to run for mayor. Anyway, we were walking in a store with the families, and it hit me. Gary, I could have been in Bangladesh. I didn't know where I was. And I was walking back to the car with Corinne, and she's like, are you driving? I said, I can't even walk. And I was just so thankful that I didn't see anybody that I grew up with, because they would have thought, what have you been doing for the last 20 years? Is this what your life's about right now? But I remember I shook all night long. I couldn't sleep. And I said, Corinne, if you have to take me to the hospital, this is what I took. And I only took half of the capsule. Imagine the whole thing. But I remember I was stoned for 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, whew, I will never do that again. I remember giving my brother he's like, I told him what happened, and he says, why would I want it? Throw that away. And so that actually made me realize, oh, not every capsule is the same capsule. Imagine if I would have given that to Corinne's father. That would have been like, oh my gosh. And so that's why you talking about of how many, like going to a casino, what's in there? It's confusing. I took a group of retired pharmacists here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we did a day of education of the good, the bad, the ugly of dispensaries in the San Francisco Bay Area. And some of them, they were just blown away on the cleanliness and the education behind it, and then the other ones were black market, but they're still legal operations, and so you have to find, there's good and bad in everything. I mean, in anything, I should say good. Some people might like the hole in the wall, dark, grungy bar, nothing wrong with that. And other people want to go over here. So I'm not saying it's one's better than the other, but I wanted to show them the differences. And especially for a first timer cannabis patient, like yourself or some of your colleagues or in the congregation that you're taking there, they're like, where do I start? And so you being that guidance hand of giving them support and saying, here, I'm here for you. Ask the questions. We can double down on trying to find the right thing, and the importance of labels is great. So don't always, just because it looks small doesn't mean that it's not powerful in some cases. So be careful what you're ingesting. And like alcohol, or unlike alcohol, you drink it, you can throw up and go, ooh, I'm not doing that again. Where cannabis, it's in your system, and it's not deadly. We've had Dr. Frankel on, Dr. Goldstein, Dr. Sulak, Dr. Behrman, who you're talking about, the sleep, sleep it off. You can take a hot bath if you're able to, peppercorns, chewing a couple peppercorns, or even take a drag of a CBD oil. And, it's hard to say you're already up here, blasted out of your mind, to say, here, try this, Gary, take some more. You're like, are you out of your mind? Right. But we've seen it, we've seen it, people taking it. It's almost like an anti-venom to bringing it back. And so with your guidance, with you taking some of your, I guess, colleagues and congregational members to these dispensaries. But you mentioned also what brought on this call, this email of the long haulers with COVID. And I think you mentioned, or I read it, that you have lost a few parishioners to COVID.
Yes, there's been a few people in our church that have passed away due to COVID, and as well as a number of individuals in the church that have tested positive and gone through their process, some hospitalized and others just on their own and complaining. I also wanted to mention just one thing else before we kind of leave the conversation. That is, I had a person in the church ask me for some support for her mother. And so I was able to talk them into getting a consultation through United Patients Group, which is my number one thing. Before I say anything to anybody, I give them the information that they need to consult with a medical professional. So having said that, she did that, and she got a report and a protocol to try. But what I found is that even with the very clear instructions as to what to try, it still was helpful for her to receive me telling her why it's happening this way, what the medical professional is trying to do with saying, okay, use a 5-to-1 tincture, and just do a couple of tinctures fulls. You're not going to get high, you're not going to get a buzz, but as you acclimate with this tincture, you're going to be able to increase your THC intake over time. So those kinds of things are helpful to be explained, so that a patient doesn't kind of just see the recommendation as being, oh, I do this and then I'm better. No, there's a process that moves towards dialing in a very precise, very precise prescription protocol. Yeah. Yes, that's the word. And anyway, so I find that while it's integral to a person really maximizing their benefit and an ability to navigate the complexities, having some medical professional basically say, here's a place to start, and here's a process that you can dial in to see if this is going to be of value to you. It's helpful to for a person not only to get the recommendation, but then to be able to process that in a way that they can actually execute the recommendation. So I had to go to the dispensary with this person who is helping her mother, and be able to show her what she needed to ask for. And because it's one thing to get a prescribed ratio of 5-to-1 of CBD to THC, but what's the best way to really acquire that in the context of you have 20 different tincture products, and there are different servings within each product. Yep. And so so the whole idea of being able to not only optimize a person acquiring the right product, but being able to not spend money that's unnecessary or a waste of money on product that is not necessarily suitable. So those are things that unfortunately we can't necessarily impact other than to be, kind of our own ambassadors and helping people as we can, just to kind of manage to get what they need. So it becomes down to just that nitty gritty.
Well, one, I didn't know you did that. So that was, thank you for trusting us with your friends as well. Yeah. Go with us or go with someone else. I truly believe a medical professional should be involved. Just because, as you're mentioning, it's not a one size fits all. There's so many things to look into finding that sweet spot. Maybe it takes 2 weeks, 2 months to find that sweet spot of what works for you, or the products, you and I could, you're in Washington, I'm in California. And because we're two legal states, doesn't mean that we have the same products in there. So what may work for me down here or someone in another legal state, Colorado or Florida, you might not have access. And we hear that all the time. And so it's important to have some guidance because they do go over age, weight, current health condition, the sensitivities, the stage of what you're going through, any other drug-to-drug interactions.
Yes.
And take a look at that. And I think with that, it educates the patient, makes them feel a little more confident, a little more, I can do this. But also, I always offer family members. Do you want your family member on? Bring them on. Yeah. When Crindlesville, I went to every single one of her appointments and I took notes. And she'd just go, oh, thank you. I'm like, well, I'm not going to leave you here, just like you were with your deceased wife. And earlier you mentioned Jane. Jane's your current wife, right?
Yes.
Who's also co-pastor?
Co-minister.
Co-minister.
Right,
excuse me. Okay.
Yeah, when we took the job, there's only one position offered, but we just split it between the two of us.
Deal. Hey, this is a joint a team.
Yeah, and what enabled us, because we're both part-time, enabled us to do the other things. As I mentioned, I'm a published author, and we have a worldwide shadow work program. We've trained over 8,000 people to go through our shadow work process with over 140 facilitators worldwide. I'm an experimental aircraft pilot and builder.
That and you're working on your fourth plane now, or?
Yeah, I've just finished building my fourth airplane. I still have to find an airfield to do some test flights. And I'm also a martial artist. I have 45 years in
Taekwondo, right?
Taekwondo and other martial arts. So I have health and fitness as a part of my
Good.
core foundation, as I know that you do too, John.
Yeah.
And when and so the whole idea of helping people with their health challenges is, it's broadened itself. It's no simple thing anymore. We have to treat the whole person. Diet, exercise, sleep, all the balances that we need to have in our own personal, emotional well-being. And we these pandemic times, we're literally exposed to a level of trauma that it's not uncommon for us to think in terms of all of us being affected by post-traumatic stress disorders in some fashion. And if we're not treating ourselves as if we're exposed to and modulated by the incoherence that surrounds us, especially in our divided and polarized society, if we don't understand that has impact on our well-being and our internal state, we will just allow the forces of the world to kind of overwhelm us, and we'll become victim of illnesses and disease because our immune system is weak, or we're overwhelmed with stress. And so much of my experience of wholeness and well-being, especially through the use of medical cannabis, is all about bringing ourselves back into our natural state of balance and well-being. And and if we can do it in a natural way that doesn't create more complications or poison our bodies, we should be exploring that. I live in a place now where, a lot of people grow their own medicine, and it's just a part of the culture. I've had people who've come to do work with here at our property who've noticed my medicine cabinet of plants, and have commented and talked about their grow rooms and things like that. We all have to do what we have to do in order to stay healthy. And for me in my journey, I've vacillated from going to dispensaries to actually having to make my own oil myself, and trying to learn about those processes. And it's something that if you're really going to be using this modality, you have to educate yourself. It's just not something that is going to be a hit or miss kind of thing.
And I learn every day. You talking about medicine. I've grown some plants, and when Corinne was diagnosed, I grew in the backyard, and we're here in California, so it was outdoor. But it educated a lot of family members. It educated the doctors that had come over, educated the hospice members that came over, like, oh. And, they started like this and turned out to be big bushy plants. But the scent, the visual, it brought happiness. We would have all of our doors open, and you could just smell it. And it's not, I think it's terpenes, and I'll go into terpenes, but there is a study with terpenes and COVID. Doctor, yeah, and so I'll share this with. I have this up here, and I'll do a split screen. But having those plants there, we would have family members like, "What's that? That's a cannabis plant. Can I touch it? Of course you can. Oh, smell it. And it just kind of perked people up, but it educated people. Like, I had no idea. I just automatically assumed it was what a joint and putting in a pipe and people smoke and get high. Yeah, you do that, but there's other forms. I mean, nowadays you have topicals, you have patches, you have the oils, you have the tinctures, you have, what am I missing? Smokables, vapors. I mean, eye cream. I use face cream. But there's so many different body products out there right now. I need shaving cream. It's starting to itch. I was keeping this, and I think I'm gonna shave it.
Oh, it's looking good. I was just noticing that, John. You're looking pretty slick there.
My mom last night's like, "You gonna shave that thing?" It's funny. I have gray hair, but I don't have gray hair, which I'm happy about. But anyway, back to your medicine cabinet. I think it's wonderful, and I think if you're able to have the opportunity to grow and not have to look over your shoulder, meaning in an illegal state, I recommend it for everyone to do it. It's a beautiful hobby, and it will actually, in my opinion, bring family and friends closer together. Because I remember when we did this, we shared this, and my mom was like, how can I grow one of these? And you being she goes to church before COVID, she was at church 6 days a week, So, I can't tell you how many of her fellow friends who are from church that contact me. Hey, I was talking to your mom at Mass the other day. Does it help for this? And how you were talking about of all the different uses. Does it work for this? And you may have heard me talk about this on the show, but I say it's like duct tape. I don't want to say it's like duct tape with a million uses, but when you really get down to it, there are so many different studies showing, from sleep, anxiety, depression, cancer, AIDS, Parkinson's, epilepsy. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And so, we were fortunate we lived in a legal state, and just the same thing with you as well. You were talking about, I'll just share this split screen here, and I'll share. I did a podcast with Dr. Bonnie Goldstein, and so she shared some studies, and I'll send this over to you, Gary, as well. But some of these are studies that are, and this was probably about 3 months ago, so maybe more studies have come out. But these are 3 studies. But talking about terpenes, which I was talking about, the smelling. of the plant, the scent that comes off. And so terpenes for our listeners, we're all familiar with terpenes. It's stop and smell the roses, that scent that you smell the roses and the feeling that it gives you. It brings me back to my grandparents, or my grandmothers, I should say. But smelling a lime, smelling a lemon, smelling the pine needles, linalool, which is lavender, the calming effect, all the above. And so, but these are three different studies showing how cannabis has, in these studies, showing the benefits of cannabis when it comes to COVID as well. And so,
awesome.
But I'll share that with you, and you can take a deeper dive, and I'll put the link out for our listeners as well. So, what's happening with your congregation and some of your fellow friends over there that are going through this? Some have lost this battle to this disease. A year ago, right now, I grew up in Asia, so I'm my cousin Greg, who's here in the Bay Area. He's like you. I want to say, it's fifth degree. Your possibility. You're fourth degree. So yeah. I think he's fourth degree, but in Taekwondo as well. But growing up, my dad was in banking, and so we lived in Tokyo and also the Philippines, and then I always came back as California's home base. But last year, exactly a year ago, I was in Asia for our school's 100th anniversary of it being a school, 1920 to 2020. And there were about 1,600 alumni from around the world that showed up. And that will probably never happen again. But it was one experience. But while we were there, everyone was talking about this China flu. And be careful. It's going to, probably make its way back over here. And look where we are now. A year later, and a lot of lives have been affected, and it's still being affected by this. So hopefully, and now all these new strains are coming out, and so I don't know. I'm not. I don't know if I'm on board with the vaccinations. I'm not.
How do you feel about vitamin D3?
I'm a big fan, and I take a lot of vitamin D. When Corinne was ill, we consulted with doctors around the world, and this one doctor out of Australia who was really, his whole thing was about vitamin D. And he said, take Corinne to a deserted island and be on a beach, get in the water with the minerals, eat the fruit, the seafood. And I said, if she was having a nervous breakdown, I would take that vacation, but I can't, because it's not a nervous breakdown. It's pancreatic cancer. But I'm in California and it's summer, so we have the sun. And he said, why? And he says, vitamin D, vitamin D, vitamin D. He goes, I can't tell you how many cancer patients, but if you get the vitamin D, this, what he shared with us, vitamin D, sodium, potassium chloride, and vitamin D. And with the vitamin D from the sunlight will heat up the capillaries, converting to HCl, which will attack the cancer cells. And so we became obsessed with getting vitamin D, and not just vitamin D going outside everybody with putting, 50 sunblock. And I know you had melanoma, but, getting it on the torso became something that we were doing every day. And I was watching her pain levels go down, her cancer levels go down. She was standing more upright. Her breathing changed. And even our doctors, like, what are you guys doing? And we shared. And that year we had the fires, which is about an hour north of us in Napa Valley. Mm-hmm. The smoke permeated through the whole Bay Area. And in those 10 days of not being able to get outside to get fresh air and vitamin D, that's when Corinne declined. So I am a big fan of vitamin D. It's kind of hard to share with someone who I'm talking to had melanoma. So what are your thoughts? And how did you get on your back? Was it a sunburn that you had on your back years ago? Or
no. So they surmised that when I was a child, I had a severe sunburn that kind of conditioned myself to the melanoma. And then it just used a moment in my life to kind of emerge itself. So who knows what stress actually produced it. But
the which one, sorry?
So my tumor just, I guess I'm I lost my train of thought here. That's another side effect of
no problem. But with the vitamin D, we were talking vitamin D,
yeah.
and then with melanoma.
So I had heard that I read somewhere recently that 80% of those who are get COVID have vitamin D3 deficiency.
Totally.
And so in doing more research, finding out that what's recommended is 10,000 units of vitamin D3 a day. And then, and so Jane and I both take that amount of vitamin D3 as well as the organics products, the two of them that have to do with the mushroom, fermented mushrooms, as well as the coumadin. It also has vitamin D3 in it. So,
gotcha.
So we're finding that we believe that we're optimizing our immune system, and like you, we're kind of tentative about this vaccination, wanting to kind of wait and see what.
Totally.
It's too soon. You know, we've seen so much that has been rushed through.
Yeah.
That has not been worked through. So
yeah. And I go through that with my brain every once in a while too. So don't feel bad. What was I just talking about? You're like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever use cannabis as a topical on any of your, wounds or tumors? I mean, I know patients have, like I said, I'm not going to tell you if you've heard someone eat this and it's successful. I've had breast cancer patients, females, that have actually slathered the oil. And so back to what Gary was talking about, the Rick Simpson oil, it's the consistency looks like molasses, and it's dark like molasses, the way Rick Simpson's protocol is and made. But they would rub it directly on the breast on the outside. I've had other skin cancer patients that have put it in. Most skin cancer patients, when I didn't know where you had it.
It's all internal. All mine were internal.
And that's, wow. I mean, that's rare, huh?
Yes, very rare.
I mean, you were kind of, God was shining down on you because you went in for one thing. Would you say it was a hernia?
Yeah, I had a hernia operation, and then when I went back for the checkup to make sure, and I just asked about a lump, and I had the lump for a long time. I just didn't ask anybody about it. And then I had one underneath my armpit, and then I had one on my buttocks. And then we had the biopsy, and then we had the PET scan, and then, then I just started my protocol. I did, my oncologist did offer to, they offered to send me to Seattle to have a tumor removed and T cells created, and they were going to nuke my body with chemo for 5 days straight, and then reinsert it, and hopefully that I'd survive. And they thought I was a very good candidate because I'm very healthy otherwise. So I decided not to do that, but I did agree to begin the Keytruda, which was immunotherapy, not chemotherapy. And by there's 6 protocols. They give you 6 infusions 3 weeks apart, and then they want to see if it helps. Well, by the 2nd infusion, I was cancer-free. So I let the doctors believe that my RSO helped amplify the effects of their Keytruda. But as far as I'm concerned, it wasn't the Keytruda.
It was the cannabis. In regards to amplifying, we have a lot of patients that come to us and say, I'm going to try this first, and if this does not work, then I'll try cannabis or another type of protocol. And everybody's on their own journey. You and I have both experienced immense pain having lost of a wife. I'm still in that stage, and it's 3 years later. So I'd never tell anybody not, don't do this. And so, but I want to share that cannabis can successfully go hand in hand with other protocols of chemo radiation. Helps with mood, helps with appetite, helps with nausea, helps with sleep, which is so important, in a healthy body or a body that has something as severe as cancer. And so, and I like the idea that you shared too. You've mentioned THC because of the media, 5 years ago really pumped up Rick Simpson, take a gram, take a gram, take a gram. And then people realize a gram was too much. How do you expect me to take a gram? And so me personally, and it sounds like you, Gary, as well, is you wouldn't recommend that for most people. And so here's my brain fart where I was going. I have no idea where I was going with this thing, but yeah, having the guidance, believe when I was there and it was gone. Sorry. What were we talking about?
Well, I don't know, but I came up with something that I'd like to share.
Please.
And that is another aspect of coaching members in my church. I had one member who was dealing with pain in his feet, neuropathy. Yeah. And to the point of, thinking about killing himself. I mean, there's been a lot of people who've had that kind of nerve pain and not being able to get any kind of relief. So I just shared with him how to make the CBDA and THCA capsules, with the raw bud. And we went to the store and bought CBD joints because that was an easier way of getting the high CBD, and then mixed it with just a normal ounce of THC bud and grinded it all up, put it in the capsules. And 3 weeks later, he came to me in tears, saying that his pain was gone and basically saved his life, he would claim. And to have that kind of impact on somebody who struggled with the medical community and not being able to get any relief, to me, just having the one or two people that I've seen have profound improvements is so gratifying, as you probably have experienced over these years.
It really is. And I'm not a doctor, so I don't tell him what to do. But I've had that. Who a friend of mine, he's a DC chiropractor, and he's late 70s, and he had the tinnitus, just ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing and ringing. And I said, there are some studies, I would try this. And his wife said, he's tried everything. And his ringing has stopped. And this has probably gone on for 8 years now. And I've gone to events with them, and I walk in and people come up, you're the one that saved Michael's life. I said, I didn't save anybody's life. No, he tried everything, and he even had the thoughts that your friend had, like, I can't do this. I mean, I want to, I need to, and the ringing was so bad that it was making him crazy. And of course I had thoughts of taking my life, is what he said. And I've changed. So just to have that, when you can help somebody and share this knowledge and education and pay it forward. I mean, this is something that Corinne and I have always done, is we live our life like that, not only our public life, but our private life is paying it forward, helping. I know where I was going with that brain fart I had about 8 minutes ago. So thanks for filling in for me for a second, because it came back. Yeah, but I was thankful for you talking about THC, because the media how everyone was talking about Rick Simpson 5 years ago, take a gram, take a gram. The media has really pushed everybody away from THC and put CBD in the forefront. And so we still get a lot of patients who say, I want to try this. I want the medical portion, which is CBD, and not the recreational portion, with THC in their mind. And all the cannabinoids that this plant has to offer, they all have a role in bringing the body back to homeostasis and balance. And like you with cancer, and like with my father-in-law, if he was on a full CBD regimen, I know for a fact he would not be here today. That THC and his protocol for his RSO, fecal full extract cannabis oil protocol, his oil was a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 parts THC, 1 part CBD in that oil. Were you, because the true Rick Simpson oil is high THC. The true Ripson oil was made with paint thinner. And so that's what a lot of people are like, okay, hold on. So that's why when I always say, I don't want people to think all oil is Rick Simpson oil, like all coffee is not Starbucks coffee, you being from Washington as well. So with your study, did you research THC versus CBD when battling your types of cancers? And I
Well,
know you're doing different cannabinoids now.
yeah, at the time, no, I didn't. I didn't know about the other cannabinoids.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew about CBD, but hemp has got kind of soured my really welcoming any kind of information. And
Yeah.
interesting, my father, who is not well, he lives in Milpitas, California.
Oh, yeah.
I'm from San Francisco,
Okay.
Bay Area.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he was telling me how he was benefited by CBD. He orders it online, and then I was saying, well, you don't know what you're getting when you don't know what you're getting. So, but since then, when I first started my protocol, if I didn't buy what I needed at the dispensary, especially when Washington State folded the dispensaries and recreationals together, there was no longer the incentive for people to make high quality, high THC RSO or full extract. So consequently, it went from like 90% THC to 60 or 70 or 80 if you're lucky, and it doubled in price. And so that drove me to try to grow my own and to experiment with the different solvents. I first used acetone, which was not good. And then finally, I discovered organic 200 proof grain alcohol. And so I've been using that, and that's much easier to manage. And using a rice cooker and a fan and doing it with good ventilation, it's relatively safe, and it's very effective. And so the challenge is that unless you have a green thumb, you probably can't grow enough to make it worth your while unless you have a bountiful harvest. Otherwise, it may be cheaper to just purchase an ounce of shake or a pound of shake as opposed to actual bud itself.
Yeah.
And that's more cost effective. So part of the challenge in all of this is if you have a long-term illness that requires maintenance, you got to consider the expense of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so for me, if I make a batch of RSO that's going to last me all year, I might spend $2,000 to just either buy the bud and the solvent and make it, or spend the time to grow 15 plants, which is what I'm legally allowed to grow, and try to produce enough to make it cost effective. So part of my journey, my struggle is still trying to manage the expense of what it takes to kind of really have the full benefit of what's available.
Yeah. Yeah, we have made it. And so I have to throw this disclaimer because you've brought up things that I haven't talked about in a long time, but I was the same thing. People are like, well, I'm going to make it myself. Well, do you have access to Everclear, 190 proof or 200 proof? No. And we were getting a lot of patients that were getting sick because they were making it with rubbing alcohol. There's a reason why the winos can't go down to CVS and buy a 69 bottle of rubbing alcohol and drink it. They'll get sick. And I just, there are some companies that are using isopropyl alcohol, which I'm not a big fan of. And so they can do what they want. They think it burns off, but I just think, I wouldn't put me, and I'm not a chemist and expert on making oil. I probably wouldn't use paint thinner, and I probably wouldn't use isopropyl. But just for our listeners, it is, as Gary was saying, it can be dangerous because highly flammable. And so if you are going to do it on a double burner heat plate where there's no open flame. So be cautious with that. If you're able to do it outdoors, go do that as well. But you're talking about cost, because I used to share that exact same thing. I'm going to make it. And it's like, if you don't know how to grow, you could have mold on it. Because I know a lot of growers that have been growing for 30, 40 years that still lose crops because of mold. So I don't care what an expert grower you are, mold can come in. And so you have to cut that down and throw it away. And so one, if you don't have a lot of money, that could be a waste. Two, time, because we used to work with a lot of patients that, like my father-in-law, were given 2 weeks, 3 weeks to live. And it's not, you're not growing a plant like putting something in the microwave and for 5 seconds it's warm.
Right.
And then cost, you don't have time for trial and error as well. And so in that case, I think you're better off, like Gary, like you were saying, Gary, go down to the dispensary and buy it from a company that's made it, that's tested it. The lab results are there because you know exactly what's in it. If there's any pesticide, mold, toxins, what the formulations are. And so um, I hope everyone can grow and maybe even try making oil. But if you're in a position of, not having that time on your side, I would probably go down and just buy it from a reputable source as well. And nowadays, with cannabis being legal, I think in 35 states, that number is growing. And so, but I appreciate you coming on. I mean, really, I really enjoyed this.
Me too.
Do we leave anything out? And do you have any closing words?
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity just to be in the conversation, and I'm passionate about people really understanding the value of medical cannabis, and just hope it has helped people appreciate and deepen their understanding. So I'm glad to have contributed to the wellspring of information that
Definitely
moves people into a more positive relationship with this sacred plant.
Thank you. And can you share, because I did see the video that you made, the capsules, and so how can people find you?
Well, they can go to my YouTube channel and Dr. Gary Simmons, and they can check it out there. Also, I have a blog page, drgarysimmons.com. My blog is focused on my other passion, and that is supporting churches and becoming healthy during these times, because right now 9 out of 10 congregational ministries are in decline. Prior to the pandemic, this was the state of the industry. And so in my work, I coach ministerial colleagues and ministry leaders into different organizational practice that is more able to thrive in these times. So that information, if you're interested, is also available on my blog as well as my YouTube channel. I've got hundreds of videos on a number of different topics, including how to install an engine in an airplane, if you're interested.
I don't like the experimental portion, 4 experimental airplanes. So,
hey, they have parachutes in them now. I was
going to say, your wife does a lot of praying. Okay, Gary, get your butt down here to it. So, so your 2 websites, is it drgarysimmons.com?
Right, and the Q Effect.
YouTube, and then you have the Q Effect with the EFFECT.com.
Right.
God, I was going to say one more thing too, but I really enjoyed this. I really have enjoyed this, and I thank you for being open to contact me. And it turned into this, a great conversation and helping others too. And so, but I thank you, Gary. And
if I can make another contribution in some respect, being a part of a dialogue, a forum, or anything, just let me know.
Please. And you were talking about your congregation. Our church up here felt bad for Father John for the past 5 years. We've been doing fundraisers to build this beautiful church hall, because we've had the original one for years. And they finally opened it up. They had their first crab feed last year on January 18th. Excited and then COVID came. Yeah. So a lot of the donations, because of Easter masses and every Sunday mass, that was help. And so they've lost out on all those. And so he's sitting there going, God, we did all these fundraisers. We built this beautiful church hall, and we were expecting, donations are huge in any church, any congregation too. So if anybody wants to help, find Gary, drgarysimmons.com, or at the Q Effect, or on his YouTube channel. And I'll put all those links in our podcast here, Gary. Awesome. And can't thank you enough, and blessings to you and Jane and everything you're doing as well. And really enjoyed this. Thank you very much.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, let's stay in touch. Okay.
Yeah, I definitely will. And we'll see you, and we'll see you, our followers. John Malanca with the United Patients Group. Be informed and be well, and we'll see you then. Have a great day. Bye-bye. Hi, John Malanca here with the United Patients Group. I hope you've enjoyed our videos. Please click like as well as subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Also, follow us on Twitter at Patients Group and on Facebook at United Patients Group, as well as for our podcasts. Please click the link in the description below. We'll see you there. Bye-bye.